Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we examine the events of a specific day, the historical context, and the historical ramifications. Now, usually, this is where I say we also cover some people that were born and some people that died on that day. We're going to do things a little bit different today. I've decided that there's going to be specific days that there's one thing or one person that was born or one person that died that's all we need to cover because that I need time to cover it in the proper context and proper light. And today is one of those days. So it's going to be the first in a series of videos like this. And trust me, there's not going to be many. I plan to do one with the moon landing. I plan to do one with the Kennedy assassination. Monumental events such as that. The why February 22nd? Today is the birthday of George Washington, the father of the United States of America, the first president of the United States. Washington served from April of 1789 till March of 1797. And Washington could have served a third term if he wanted to. He could have served till he died. He could have become a king. But he became a president. And he set the standard. And for a long time, 2 terms was the standard. People followed that tradition. There were some, obviously, that tried to upend that. Wilson tried for a 3rd term. Grant attempted at in 1880. You could argue Theodore Roosevelt tried for a 3rd term himself. FDR was the first that broke it, and he served obviously 2 additional terms. And then the Constitution said no, 8 years, 2 terms is the standard. I think that's the amazing thing about Washington. Washington could become a king, like I said, but he didn't. There is a story that they were coming up with what to call him. Some people said his high mightiness. Some people said his excellency and defender of our liberties. He said, Mr. President will do. It's nice. Just Mr. President. And that has become the standard. The honorable is a more formal, but Mr. President, President Washington. But you should have known Washington was going to do something like this. After the Revolutionary War, he went before the Continental Congress and gave up his sword, gave up his command of the army, and he returned to Mount Vernon. And then he went to the Constitutional Convention, and after that, in the first presidential election, he stayed quiet behind the scenes, moved the levers, and answered his country's call to be the first president. There was no doubt who was going to win. He's the only president to win election unanimously, and he did it twice. And as I said, he could have done it a 3rd time. He was a very vigorous man. He was kind of a 18th century action hero. He died before the completion of the White House. He died about a year before, almost exactly a year before Adams would move in. He didn't see the city completed, but he was involved in the planning. the site where the United States Capitol is a site chosen by Washington. And the city, of course, bears his name. Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. I said in the previous video that Lincoln is the greatest president, and I'll stand by that. But Washington sets the precedent. Actions that Washington took in his first term and second term set the standard. There was a time when Washington went to the Senate for some advice and consent and sought out the Senate's advice. And he went away saying that's the last time I'll ever go to them because he was so frustrated. And that set the precedent that the president negotiates and then he sends it to the Senate, a treaty. Or the president makes a nomination and he sends it to the Senate and they can vote it up or down. It's just, in my opinion, such a revolutionary tactic that he took. And there had never been an office like this. And it endures to this day. There's been a lot of re-examination of Washington in the past several years, particularly because of his ownership of slaves. And it's a complicated history. It's a complicated question. I think you do have to take that into consideration when examining his legacy. But I also think you have to take in the historical context in which he owned them. You have to read his writings. And I also think you have to look at the time and place. There certainly were abolitionists in colonial America. Abigail Adams comes to mind. Was fervently opposed to slavery her entire life. John Adams was opposed to slavery, although he had a different interpretation of the role of government in it, but he was opposed to slavery. Washington owned slaves as president. And he freed his slaves upon death. It's complicated how they were freed and the time frame, but that was part of his will. And he laid out in specific detail how he wanted them freed. It was the largest part of his will. I also think that we probably lost Washington too soon, but possibly at the right time. Washington died in 1799. He died in the next shortly before the last year of the 18th century began, and at the dawn of the 19th century. And he basically was saying to the columnists, I believe, it's like a fatherly figure leaving and telling the kids, you're going to have to figure it out on your own. And we had to figure it out on our own. He was not here for the War of 1812. He was not here for after Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton. He was not here for the Indian Removal Act. He was not here for when Harrison died, although he would have been in his hundreds when Harrison died. But he would have... was not here for the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, as Adams and Jefferson died on. He was not here for those events. And it's probably better that he wasn't. As I said, he died in 1799 at the age of 67, which was a long life then. But I think that it's possibly a good thing that he left when he did, when he passed when he did, because this country had to figure it out without him, and it proved that this country was stronger than one man. And when he exited the stage and passed on into history, the country survived, and the country endured. A couple of quick notes. I didn't get an Iowa prediction video up. I'm sorry. Time got away from me. It's not going to happen again. I promise. Tomorrow at some point on Monday, I'm going to get my my Nevada reaction video out. Like I said, I didn't get a prediction video out, but we're going to make up for it with a reaction video. And then on Friday, for sure, I've blocked out time on Friday for this. I'm going to get your South Carolina prediction video out. And then on Sunday, next Sunday, I'm going to do my Super Tuesday prediction video with my endorsement in it. So, that's my feelings on the father of this country. If you said point blank, Jank, where do you rank George Washington in the pantheon of presidents? I probably put him in the 4th position. I think that Lincoln is number 1. I certainly would argue strongly that FDR is number 2. Number 3, I would argue would be probably Truman. And then I would say Washington. Washington, in my opinion, probably deserves that spot because of the issue of slavery and other issues that I look at and see where I think maybe if he had taken a different track, American history might have turned out for the better. Maybe he should have tried to stick with negotiating on Congress on treaties. Possibly the war of the Second World War could have been prevented because the League of Nations might have stood a chance. But that's my thoughts. I know it's quite controversial not to put Washington 1 or 2, and I put him at number 4. But I've got to take those other legacies he has into account. I think he certainly should be celebrated. And those who want to tear his name off of buildings and kind of put him down the memory hole, I strongly disagree with them. But I also think we should take a realistic view of George Washington, because he is more than a marble monument. He was a real man with real faults and real great attributes. Like I said, we're going to do this a few times this year. but they're going to have to be red letter days, and I think this is one of them. I'll see you all tomorrow.